Tonight I'm reading the first chapter of The Secret Lake by Karen Ingalls. Chapter 1, The Gardener. Tom's face felt so hot he was sure it was about to explode. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on his face and back, and the beads of sweat that had long since formed on his forehead began to itch and tingle. But still, he dug on. Surely, if he kept going, there would be a sign. A tuft of silky fur, perhaps. A distant squeak. Or, and this really would be the best, a pair of tiny eyes squinting blindly up towards the daylight. He paused to wipe the trickling sweat with the back of his wrist, then lifted his spade for what felt like the 100th time, just as a dark shadow loomed up from behind. A familiar chill traveled down his spine with heart pounding. He swiveled round to meet the piercing stare of the gardener, Charlie Green. "Now look here, Tom Hankin. I've told you before, I've enough trouble chasing up these darn molehills without having you going round digging 'em up." Tom felt his cheeks burning, which was odd because his body was suddenly freezing. Charlie Green had had it in for him since the day they moved to the gardens. Of that he was sure. He was also giving him funny looks. Tom tried to speak, but his throat, which suddenly felt drier than the Sahara at noon, stuck tight. He never had been brilliant at getting out of trouble, just expert at getting into it. Charlie Green squinted darkly. "Next time, I'll have to tell your mom," he growled. "Now that rag of yours, take it and be off." Tom fumbled as he gathered up the corners of his treasure rag. To his relief, Charlie Green hadn't noticed the array of plant bulbs he had dug up, which now lay scattered in amongst his earth treasure. 3 handsome stones, a piece of broken green bottle, and a tatty old purse that had probably belonged to a child's doll. The stones he would keep and place in his box marked Tom's Earth Treasure, which sat in the grate of his enormous bedroom fireplace. Everything else he would throw back. By the time he nudged open the small gates separating his parents' small patio garden from the main communal gardens, Charlie Green had already refilled the moleholes and was now stomping angrily across the lawn towards his shed. Clusters of tiny earth mounds lay scattered all around. It had been a bad week for moles in West London. Tom's heart took off every time he entered his first-floor bedroom. After his tiny room in their 10th floor Hong Kong apartment, it really was a dream come true. His ceiling reached high, like a private indoor sky. The narrow French doors opening onto the tiny sun-filled balcony stood tall as skyscrapers, and on the far wall a magnificent marble fireplace stood even taller than he was. But more important than all of these things was the view. Tom's new room looked out onto a vast, rambling garden that stretched as far as the eye could see. The garden, which was shared by all of the houses in the square, was filled with clusters of rhododendron bushes and sprawling oak trees, whose branches seemed to brush the passing clouds. Tom pressed his nose hard against the French door window and breathed in deeply, still wondering about Charlie Green. Then, through his clouds of warm breath on the glass, he saw a small dog shoot out from a cluster of trees and across the lawn towards the houses. Slowly, Tom's mouth widened into a grin. "I don't believe it, Stell," he yelled at the top of his voice. "Harry's back." Stella, who was lying on her bed in her room next door studying her friendship bracelet, didn't answer. With her iPhone music on full volume, she was busy hoping that her friends back in Hong Kong, who would all be asleep now, had thought about her today. She also happened to be crunching her fifth fruit polo of the day, lime green flavor to be precise, the one that always made her ears tingle. "Tom thinks he's in heaven," she had just messaged her best friend, Hannah, on Facebook. "But it's so deathly dull here, all molehills and boys." Stella didn't budge, nor for that matter did Tom, who was now leaning out so far over his balcony he was in danger of falling off. He was determined to see if old lady Mrs. Moon would be at her gate to welcome her disappearing dog. Of course, she wasn't. After all, she would have to be psychic to know exactly when Harry would choose to come home. Never mind psychic, all the garden residents thought Mrs. Moon was batty. Her lost dog notices were pinned up everywhere, and she drove them all mad, phoning them up each time Harry went off, which was often for days at a time. Tom had found himself wondering about Harry when he was out digging. The little long-haired terrier's comings and goings seemed to be part of garden life, as did the snarling Charlie Green in the molehills, and of course, the dotty old Mrs. Moon. But why did the dog keep disappearing? And exactly where did he go? As thoughts of Charlie Green quickly evaporated, Tom resolved to solve Harry's mystery by the summer's end. Stay tuned for Chapter 2 next evening.